Okay, so today's Wednesday, February 16th, and yeah, I should have made a list of these tips, but I didn't, so I'm just going to try to remember them. And in general, again, one main thing is that we want to use 30 degrees for at least one of the views, okay? So that's still 30. I saw it this morning in the class, a lot of people were still doing this, where this is 90 degrees, and that's no good. I mean, it's okay, but it's, it's kind of a easy way out, because then all you have to do is do a circle here, right, for your corners, if you have an object that has corners there. So instead, you want your object to be squished, if you will. So think about these arrows, pushing out and pushing in. And so if you have your object, let's say that's your phone, what you need to do is you need to angle it so that it starts looking like a diamond, okay? So that's the first thing, because otherwise all you do is you're just adding a little thickness there. And once you do the first one, you can do the second one, because we're doing two views, right? You should do one, let's say the first one is this, okay, lying on the ground like that. You should try to do one where you're squishing it even further, okay, so that maybe it's like this. So kind of really, so you're seeing mostly the side of your object, okay? And put a number here. And then one thing to remember is that you can do, it's easier maybe to draw it like this, again, lying on the ground, mostly because you can put the phone on the ground, right? And so you don't have to suspend it in the air. But once you do it, you can rotate that and pretend it is floating in the air. In other words, I draw it like this, and then I can just turn it, and it becomes my nice little, floating in space kind of object. Okay, like that. So that could be your final drawing. And to achieve that, it might be easier to draw it like this. But then in your layout, you turn it, okay? So, let's put this number 3 here. Let's talk about the corners and the circles. So once again, what you should do is have your angles, and then determine how big your corners are. They're probably part of a circle, right? So you should kind of plot out your corners. So I'm pretending this is let's say it's an iPhone 4 with big corners. Okay. And then you draw your ellipses inside. What I've seen that's not so good is that some people, because it's kind of instinctual to do, say, this, and then you go over here and you do that, okay? Because that's kind of the same curve, and because conceptually we know that the corners have all the same curves, we do this. And that's obviously wrong, because this would be part of a much bigger ellipse, right, than this one is. In fact, these are the same ellipse. You're just using a different part of it. Another trick that you can do is that once you solve one side, let's say the left corner, you can actually flip that to be the right corner, and you can almost do the same with the bottom for the top, except that here you just see a little bit less. So let me see how I can show that. So let me see if I can solve this part right here. And once again, if you use tracing paper is like your friend. You can just move it and, you know, trace exactly the same part. And now we remember here we just need this little bit, right? Because what I've seen is also that maybe once you get over here, it's like this angle is wrong. But in fact, if you get this right on the left side, then you can take this, and now I'm just going to use yet another piece of trace. Well, actually, let me just show you it this way. So I could take this left side now and flip it, and it becomes the corner of my right side. So my angle is a little bit wrong. It should be more vertical. Okay, so that's one little tip. And the same thing for this part. If I take this part, I can actually flip it. Where is it? Here. To be the same curve on the top. Okay? So tracing paper is very useful for that. Let's just now go back for a moment. 1, 2, 3. This is 4. The other thing, particularly if you're doing like an iPod or an iPhone or things that have circles in the middle, keep in mind once again that it's almost as if you have to find the spot where those circles are. So let's say I find the center of my maybe scroll wheel, and then you have to imagine that there is maybe a cylinder that is running through the object, right? So a section of that cylinder is what's going to look like, you know, a simple circle in perspective. And the thing to remember is that the main direction of that cylinder, in other words, in this case, the vertical, is going to match the short axis of your ellipse. So when I draw the ellipse here, that short axis is lined up with this direction, and the long axis is the opposite, or perpendicular. Okay? So in this view is, you know, fairly straightforward. Now if you do a different view that's more like, even more foreshortened, it really has to do with like, okay, which way is it now going? Is it going this way? It's probably going, you know, somewhere splitting this distance here. So maybe like that. Okay, so let's assume now I'm drawing it in space like this. I'm going to use a sharper pencil. So again, you would find your center, and maybe you find that's here. And now I'm finding maybe a square that it fits inside. So now, how do I draw this ellipse? It gets a little complicated, but what I have to remember is that that's the depth of the object, right? So my big so-called cylinder is going to go this way, right? So what I do now is I turn the paper so that this big direction faces me, and I'm going to draw the ellipse this way, with this angle being 90 degrees, okay? The challenge, of course, here now is that, and I'm going to zoom in, we're not going to see the zoom in the video, but the challenge is that that opposite axis is not going to match the corners of my square, even if I make this a little better. And that's just the fact of ellipses. They're not really like real or precise, so you just have to play with that. Because I would expect to kind of connect my corners here. But if I do that, I get this. And even though that's close, it's really not perpendicular like this one. So I kind of have to forgive it, forget it and forgive myself for not matching there, but just go perpendicular and then draw your ellipse inside that. Now this is a little messy, but I'm trying to do a very elongated ellipse. Okay. So now it should look okay once I get everything back into place. And once I draw my object around that circle. The other thing to remember is that your lines are always still parallel. So I've noticed, for example, that some people were doing just a plain iPhone, and they got the circle right, the button okay. Let's say I'm making it bigger now so you can see. But then somehow, this was the little square part there, the little symbol for on and off. And that is wrong because, again, you should be trying to follow the parallels. So if that's a square that's parallel, it should be going in the same direction. So I think I've now completed the list of the things I was trying to remember. Okay. Why don't I stop now, and then if there's questions, do you guys have any questions in general about these drawings? So I would say still freehand, and then if you want to finish up some lines, you're welcome to do them with a straight edge. That works if your original lines underneath are kind of light, like here, for example, so that when you darken something, it doesn't compete with what's already done. And it kind of works that way. Because if this is already dark, well, I have a tough time now making a straight line over that. It's just going to be a mess. Okay. All right. So I'll stop now.